These are the times to stand our ground. These are not the times to waver in our defense and vigilance of a nation that should and we wish to remain free. These are not the times to once again lull ourselves into complacency and sit upon our haunches, imagining that the war has been won. For frankly, this is the beginnings of the battle, the beginnings of the birth pangs to which we must face. Folks, this is not a joke. This is not a trial. This is not a test. This is not an earnest divination from which we are trying to maybe possibly gather our semblance of an idea of America that would be free, because the only way to make America free is to make America free, and that requires the blood, sweat, and tears of patriots. And that's why we as patriots are joined together in this moment where we ought stand our ground and demonstrate our resolve to keep this country free. I have something to read for you, and I apologize for being so forceful in my determination, but I believe that we reside at a time in our history when they would love us to go back to sleep, and we need to do the opposite. And that is, we need to charge forward into a positive future, understanding for what it is that we fight, understanding the future that we look forward to, and understanding the steps that it will take and the blood, sweat, and tears that will be required of us to reach that day. This is called Count on It. Do you remember a time when confidence and reasoned leadership governed this beloved nation? Is there a day that you quickly recall where the cowardly capitulation of American prowess and surety would not pass muster? We must labor to recall an era where America walked the righteous course of sticking to moral objectives without subjective conflict, to stand its ground with no weak-willed catcalls egging it to surrender. We are not warmongers, however, we are the educated, mature, free people who have seen what comes of surrender to ideals that have no basis in good or egalitarian import. Do we yearn to be free? And if so, will we make the recognition that this president, this military, this demonstration of the people's will is the catalyst, the fodder for the continuance of emancipation from tyranny? Character must be recognized, and current courage and resolve is the foundation that bred and counsels freedom's longevity. Do you see your posture? When have you stood so straight? Not in false pride or bravado, but the collective will and understanding that we will do whatever must be done to maintain the gift of our sovereignty. And when asked by true allies, we are always the first to come to their aid in defense of a tenuous freedom that finds itself struggling throughout this world. Yes, there are influences that appear fully capable of ruling the day or capturing the moment. But when we are this resolved, this determined, and filled with the potential explosive energy of a united people, we shall never lose the tapestry painted with the victories of a nation that will not be enslaved for any purpose, cause, ideal, or allegory. There is tangible transformation in the stance, communication, and reaction time of men who have determined to never know defeat. They will not accept it when offered, will not buy it when delivered as the only option for national salvation, and they will cast it back into the faces of the sorry lot seeking to offer it as terms for surrender. These are not the cautious actions of worrisome lot, but the reasoned and seasoned statements of those who know only success and have stricken the bullet points of quiet consideration from their menus. There is one way to live, and that, my friend, that one way is living free. For the sake of our brethren that have not yet begun to understand the nature of the deception, the ruse, having so firmly been planted in the soil of our sovereignty, the concept that a constitutional republic is somehow blasé, unrefined, outdated, or inconsistent with the thinking of a 21st century humans, smells of banana too oft ripe. This is not new thinking, this slavery to empire, dominion by government, who no longer serve the people but capture them as servants to the czar. It is old, decayed, rotten, infested, just as the bodies that have gone to the grave to feed its ravenous maw fully indicate. We get it. You believed the line that they have been posting and selling you while you ate, studied, worked, loved, and slept. We too found discomfort in this changed America, having rapidly become a semblance of European fascism, coupled with the whimsical cry of those who'd rather be wards of the state than work for their wages. Awaken, awaken, for now we have models to follow that do not cower a potential battle, but instead stand strong in diplomatic defense of a strong position and a willingness to bargain but never back down. What is worth fighting for if you have already sent the signal that there is nothing for which you would ever fight? It's understandable, this anger over your loss, and even to some measure the unwillingness to accept that defeat in displaying a resistance and covenant determination to recover your advocate position. However, now it has become painfully clear that the very same position for which you have been laboring has been proven to be false, weak, ill-determined, and arguably leading to immediate national disillusionment and perhaps even disintegration of all our historical victories. Is that what you want? Why would we ever throw away all that we have won for simply trial of an academic theoretical opinion or a failed historic experimentation, proving it unlikely to ever to produce the concepts that rival the joyous existence known as living free in a free republic? For what are we now struggling? Simply to not accept that you have been disastrously wrong from the outset? You would compound and double down on your previous missteps to perhaps bring about certain national cataclysm? That just makes no sense, except for the service of the demon of pride at the pit of all men's stomachs, refusing to subside, denying accountability, and absolutely avoiding admission of some wrongdoing or causality for our current sober-minded predicament. What are your admirable qualities as men and women? What are the characteristics to which you aspire? Certainly they are honor, honesty, dedication, perhaps valor, courage, and a hopeful commitment to a righteous cause. I don't know each of us, but we each must make this determination individually. But once made, we must together in agreement as to the answers most acceptable to the greatest majority of us all. For how can we be called a nation, a sovereign nation at that, if we do not serve a general consensus upon the preciousness of remaining free? For what purpose does a group of people join in collective commitment, if not for the preservation and growth of that same unit toward an understood and agreed upon vision for a future worth defending? Otherwise, we are simply a whole bunch of egoists gathered together in hopes of finding enough bullies to perhaps overpower the rest of the people, that we might covet their assets and eventually subject all of them to our will and authority, that we might be the kings and they be the ruled. How does tyranny win but by dominating those in disagreement, starving them out or battering them into capitulation to their acceptable position? Does this describe our current circumstance, where the few seek to corner the assets of power, money, resources, technology, logistics, agriculture, and intelligence, and government for the purpose of subjecting the rest of mankind to the rules and regulations determined to be the best service to their power base? Are we going to give in to the weak-willed thinking of egoists and self-proclaimed superiority of those who tout themselves as genus superioris? How many times do we have to defeat tyrants or narcissistic maniacs before we see their intention and direction? Are we that susceptible to the same old trick played in a bit different style of music by an alternate gender, perhaps someone who looks and acts a bit more like ourselves, that we may be more effectively lulled or duped? When is it that humanity wakes up? I hear so many for the last 160 years spout this false religion of evolutionism designed to provide an alternate description of the truth of God's coming judgment by conjuring an origin outside of the Creator. Where is evolution if we continue to replay the same acts, the same tired old play ad infinitum? Where is the change? Where is the superhuman rising above the carnal drives of animalistic man? I don't see it. So we haven't changed a lick, and even worse, we desperately have become so lazy, so tired, so easily conformed that we don't even know the history of our own century, never mind those before us. This is not the method by which to succeed in perpetuating in America an American ideal that is resistance to dissolution. What we are seeing now, the courage of this president, of our current military, loving peace so much that they will fight to defend against the outbreak or the need for war. What are we looking for except the appropriate models from which to derive the proper course, direction, and speed toward a prosperous future? What have we seen? The real miracle that God has given us in the revival of our hearts and understanding the basic ideals that made America uniquely fantastic in a world that has seen so much for so long that they have forgotten the dream that America so readily offers. What a brilliant statement to stand in the midst of global calamity and desire for freedom to demonstrate to those yearning to find that same freedom the necessary characteristics, qualities, and action steps required to its formation and millennial maintenance. This nation will only remain free when we collectively learn from the mistakes of our global agents in centuries past and determine together that defeat may not even enter any discussion of those yearning to live free from the harness of tyrants. We are free because we will do whatever it takes to stand that ground, repel you, hunt you down, trip you up, capture you, kill you, hinder you, deny you, and confront you on the fields of diplomacy and battle to make sure that you never leave without the full and reasoned understanding that if your objectives ever again involve anything that requires we lose our sovereign authority or our direct relationships and service to Almighty God, that you shall not leave the field of your own accord. You will either be forced into retreat to reconsider and reoffer a position that fully acknowledges our first statement, or we will make sure that you never leave that field as we march home in victory, crying over having had to once again defeat tyrants, but knowing fully that without that will to fight, you would never quit, and we would be your slaves. Do not expect to face us, then, with concepts that shall not be considered, whether deceptive or intimidating. You will find that we will thrash, repel, or cut them short of entering this real dimension. If you continue to deal in imaginary states where we have become part of your global monstrosity, you know the men and women you shall be facing, and we shall not be moved. Certainly you may make fun of our president. That is the free will of every coward and critic who has no better idea or action through which to win the day or suspend the calamity. Certainly, you may cause us to call us fools and determine pet names for us as you imagine your domination of this nation of free men. Certainly, you may join others of like mind and the secret handshakes and piety of sorcerers and priestesses serving the fallen who drive you to the creation of this false empire. Certainly, you are free to make up whatever stories comfort you in your dark places and give you the backbone among your brethren, but the one ideal of which you must never waver from complete certainty is that we are free people who were given the gift of that freedom by the only righteous king of a sovereign nation, and that king being Almighty God, who gave us these unalienable rights, and who will send legions of angels to protect us, and we ourselves shall gather en masse to meet you with joy in our hearts, smiles on our faces, and strength in our sword arms. For that day you challenge this nation and its sovereignty once again. Remember that the spirit of America has awoken, and that spirit is unbending, unbreakable, and only bound to the promise that we make you now. we shall continue to live free or free ourselves from the bond of this temporary life rather than live in tyranny. For we would rather live free men before God than alive here as slaves to other men. Count on it.